Kate Jones, a dedicated nurse, found herself in the most unexpected and challenging situation of her life after being unjustly fired from her job for standing up to an inappropriate surgeon. Struggling to cope with anxiety and the weight of caring for her ill father, she confided in a kind homeless man named Ian, who offered her comfort and support when she needed it most. Little did she know, this encounter would lead to a dramatic turn of events that would not only bring justice but also transform her life. As Kate faced the heart-wrenching loss of her father, she was approached by someone who would change her fate forever. With the help of Ian and a powerful ally, Kate's courage and resilience would be rewarded in ways she never imagined. The story unfolds from the depths of despair to a triumphant rise, showing that even in the darkest times, hope and justice can prevail. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Kate Jones, a young nurse of just 26, found her world shattered when she was abruptly fired from her job at the hospital. The reason? She had lashed out and physically struck her superior, an act she could barely comprehend. Reeling from the shock and overwhelmed by the weight of her actions, she found solace in the most unlikely of places, a homeless man who offered her the comfort and understanding she so desperately needed. Little did she know that the brief encounter was merely the beginning of a whirlwind of events that would soon turn her life upside down. The very next morning, she was stunned to see a sleek limousine waiting outside her modest home, an omen that her life was on the brink of an irreversible transformation. It was a Monday, the kind that starts with the sharp trill of an alarm cutting through the stillness of dawn. Kate dragged herself out of bed, the heaviness in her chest refusing to lift. She hurried through her morning routine, brewing a bitter cup of coffee and half-heartedly placing a plate of scrambled eggs on the table. Her cat, her only companion in this lonely house, meowed softly as she set down its food in the usual corner. With a heavy sigh, Kate gulped down her medication, feeling the pills slide down her throat like the burden she carried every day. She wandered through her worn-out home, the peeling ceiling and frayed carpet a stark reminder of the years of neglect, both of the house and of herself. It was a place where time stood still, a mirror to her unhealed wounds. Despite the air of despair that clung to the house, Mr. Jones, Kate's aging father, remained a beacon of warmth and resilience. As Kate entered his room with his morning medication, she found him already awake, his eyes twinkling with a spirit that defied his frail body. He greeted her with a tender kiss on the forehead, his love for her palpable in that small gesture. But even in his warmth, he could see the storm brewing behind his daughter's eyes. For weeks, he had watched her with growing concern, noticing the shadows of worry that darkened her once bright face. Though she brushed off his inquiries with assurances that it was just the stress of work, Mr. Jones wasn't fooled. He had raised her, after all, and he knew her heart better than anyone. "Sweetheart, your old man may be sick, but I'm still here for you. If something is weighing you down, I want to help," he said, his voice gentle but firm, a lifeline in her sea of turmoil. "DA, it's nothing. Just the usual craziness at work," Kate replied, forcing a smile as she handed him his pillbox. But her father's words lingered in her mind like an echo she couldn't shake. With a forced cheerfulness, she bid him a good day and stepped out into the world, carrying with her the pill she had slipped into her purse. On the bus ride to the hospital, she stared at the small white tablet, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and fears. With a deep breath and a sigh that seemed to carry all her sorrow, she swallowed the pill, hoping it could numb the pain that words could not express. Mr. Jones had seen through the brave face Kate tried so hard to maintain. He knew she was struggling, and the truth was, she was far from okay. For an entire month, Kate had been relying on those tiny pills to keep her crippling anxiety at bay. The hospital, once a place where she found purpose, had morphed into a waking nightmare. Every shift felt like a descent into darkness, but walking away wasn't an option. The bills kept piling up, and more importantly, she had to ensure her father's health was taken care of. His medications were a lifeline she couldn't afford to miss. As the bus jolted to an abrupt stop, Kate snapped back to reality, realizing she had been so consumed by her spiraling thoughts that she had missed her stop. Cursing herself under her breath, she got off at the next stop and retraced her steps, her feet heavy with the weight of the morning. If it hadn't been for that pill, she might have broken down right there on the busy sidewalk, her emotions threatening to spill over like a dam about to burst. Inside the hospital, Kate mechanically went through the motions, changing into her scrubs in the locker room. But her hands froze when she heard a familiar voice in the next room, a voice that sent a shiver down her spine. It was the surgeon, Rick Donovan, a man she was forced to work with multiple times a week. Tall, charismatic, and undeniably handsome, Donovan had a presence that was as imposing as it was unsettling. Kate's heart raced, her anxiety spiking as she hurried to finish dressing, silently praying that today would pass without incident. But fate had other plans. As she pushed open the locker room door, she came face to face with Donovan himself. "Miss Kate, it's been a while. Why haven't you stopped by my office these past few days?" His voice was smooth, with an edge that always made her skin crawl. Kate forced herself to remain composed, doing her best to keep the fear from showing on her face. "I was reassigned to another sector. They needed experienced nurses in the other wing," she replied, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. Donovan's smile was brief, almost predatory. "I see. You must be quite the experienced nurse then." Kate wanted nothing more than to get away, but Donovan wasn't finished with her yet. He blocked her path, his tone dripping with false charm. "I brought a little something for you." He began, but Kate cut him off, excusing herself with the explanation that she was already late to attend to her patients, all because of the bus delay. She was desperate to escape his presence, the dread of losing her job looming over her like a dark cloud. "Lose your job? Not as long as I'm around," Donovan assured her, his words meant to be comforting, but Kate knew better. There was a venom behind his smile. But Donovan's words were empty promises. Just hours later, Kate found herself standing in the hospital's reception area for the last time, tears streaming down her face as she clutched the termination notice from the administrative director. It was over. The job she had fought so hard to keep, the one thing she had left to cling to, had been ripped away from her. Her world was unraveling, and she felt like she was suffocating under the weight of her worries, unable to breathe or think clearly. She needed to act, to do something to regain control, but everything had spiraled out of her hands. Desperate for a refuge, Kate made her way to the one place that had always brought her a small measure of peace, a quaint little cafe just across the street from the hospital. She sank into a chair on the terrace, her mind a tangled mess of thoughts and emotions. The barista brought her an espresso, but Kate barely noticed, her hands trembling as she reached for the cup. She wanted to sort through the chaos in her mind, but the shock was too overwhelming. Guilt gnawed at her insides, and she felt utterly lost and alone, sitting in a world that suddenly felt foreign and unforgiving. Suddenly, a deep, soothing voice cut through Kate's fog of despair. "Excuse me, are you all right?" Startled, Kate looked up to find the source of the voice. To her surprise, a homeless man was standing nearby, his eyes full of concern and warmth. "Yes, I'm fine," Kate stammered, but the quiver in her voice betrayed her. "Why are you crying?" "Are you sure you're okay?" the man asked again, his tone gentle, as if he truly cared. It was only then that Kate realized a tear had slipped down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, trying to pull herself together, glancing around nervously to see if anyone else had noticed her vulnerability. "It's nothing, it will pass," she replied, her eyes taking in the man's worn and dirty clothes. Despite his disheveled appearance, he was the only one who had shown her any kindness in this moment of despair. The man hesitated as if he were about to leave, but something in Kate stopped him. Impulsively, she asked, "Would you like to sit and have something to eat?" She knew that money would be tight from now on, and every penny counted, but something inside her told her this was the right thing to do. The man accepted her offer with a gracious nod and settled into the chair across from her. "My name is Ian Bradley," he introduced himself with a smile that reached his bright, friendly eyes. "And you are?" "Kate," she responded simply, still reeling from everything that had happened. Ian wasted no time, sensing the turmoil within her. "You know, Kate, I've met a lot of people out here, and I've seen the kind of pain life can bring. I can tell you're going through something really tough. I don't want to intrude, but I want you to know that I'm just a good listener, and you probably won't ever see me again. So, if you need to talk, just let it out," he offered, his voice soft yet sincere. Kate felt a strange sense of relief wash over her, and for the first time that day she managed a small smile. "Thank you," she said quietly. She paused, realizing how much she needed to talk, how desperately she needed someone to hear her side of the story. "You're right," she admitted. "I've had a terrible day. I'm a nurse, or at least I was until today. I just got fired." The words felt heavy as they left her lips. She pointed to the hospital across the street, her hand trembling slightly. "I worked well, used to work there. But today, I lost it." "I shouted at the chief surgeon in front of everyone," she confessed, the shame and guilt of her actions weighing her down like a lead blanket. Ian listened intently, nodding slowly. "If you shouted, it must have been for a good reason," he said, his voice calm and non-judgmental. Kate was silent for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Then, with a deep breath, she began to pour out everything she had been holding inside. The words came rushing out, tumbling over one another, as if they had been locked away for too long. She told Ian how her life had taken a dark turn ever since Rick Donovan had arrived at the hospital. Transferred from another unit, Donovan's presence had turned her routine into a living nightmare. Day by day, her anxiety had grown, her fear of going to work had intensified, and her sense of helplessness had deepened. "He made everything unbearable," she said, her voice breaking. "He was charming to everyone else, but with me, it was different. He'd find ways to corner me and make inappropriate comments, and no one else seemed to notice or care. I felt so powerless, so trapped. Today, when he tried to give me another gift, I just snapped. I couldn't take it anymore." She confessed, her eyes filling with tears once again. Ian's face remained kind and understanding as he listened. "Sometimes, standing up for yourself comes with a cost, but it's a price worth paying. You didn't deserve to be treated like that," he said gently. "You have nothing to be ashamed of." Kate looked at him, this stranger who had somehow become her confidant in the span of a few minutes. For the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone in this battle. In the beginning, Dr. Rick Donovan barely acknowledged Kate's presence in the operating room or hospital corridors. He treated her as if she were invisible, another faceless figure in the busy medical environment. But everything changed one day during a routine conversation when, without warning, he casually touched her shoulder. It was a simple gesture, almost innocuous, but it marked the start of something far more insidious. The touches began to multiply, his hands lingering longer than necessary, and his eyes, those intense, piercing eyes, followed her every move, scrutinizing her with a mix of desire and domination that made her skin crawl. The worst of it came during a surgery, when Rick found an excuse to teach Kate a new procedure. He took hold of her waist, his grip firm and possessive, in full view of the entire surgical team. Yet no one seemed to notice or care. It was as if the entire room had agreed to turn a blind eye, to pretend that what was happening was perfectly normal. But Kate knew better. The incident left her feeling violated and helpless, but she couldn't bring herself to say anything. Rick was married, and despite that, he made it clear that he wanted something more from her, something that went beyond the professional. He even hinted that getting closer to him might be beneficial for her career, as if offering her a lifeline in exchange for her dignity. Kate, horrified by his proposition, simply changed the subject and walked away as discreetly as she could, her heart pounding with fear and disgust. She had thought about reporting his behavior to the administration, but what could she say? The touches, the looks, the insinuations, they were all so subtle, carefully crafted to appear innocent to an outsider. And besides, Rick had made it abundantly clear that he was a close friend of the hospital director. It would be her word against his, a powerful, married chief surgeon with connections, against a single nurse trying to make ends meet. The scales were already tipped in his favor, and Kate knew it. She swallowed her anger and fear, pushing it down into the depths of her soul, because quitting her job wasn't an option. Her father's health depended on her, and without her income, they would lose everything. But then came the day that broke her resolve, the day she ran from the hospital to the safety of the cafe. It had started like any other, with Rick saving another life in the operating room, his skills on full display. They were cleaning up afterward when Rick, riding the high of his success, began to boast about his abilities. He spoke with arrogance, claiming that his knowledge and expertise allowed him to defy even God's will. The excitement in his voice was palpable, but it took a darker turn when he added, "There's only one thing that excites me more than saving a life, Kate, it's you." His words struck her like a blow, leaving her stunned and unable to move. In that moment of vulnerability, Rick seized the opportunity. He grabbed her hand and shoved it into his front pocket. "Feel this little gift I have for you," he murmured, his voice dripping with vile intent. The revulsion that surged through Kate was immediate and powerful. Acting on pure instinct, she yanked her hand away and slapped him hard across the face. The sharp crack of the impact echoed in the room, a brief moment of triumph before the reality of what she had done sank in. Rick's face twisted with fury, his eyes blazing with a hatred so intense it made her blood run cold. He clenched his fists, his whole body trembling with barely restrained anger, but he didn't strike back. Instead, he spat out his venomous words, calling her ungrateful and crazy for throwing away her career over what he dismissed as a silly joke. "You think you'll ever step foot in a hospital here again," he hissed, his voice dripping with malice. "You'd better get used to scrubbing floors and washing dishes because your career is finished. Now, get out of my sight." His cruel words struck like daggers, each one slicing into her heart, leaving her breathless with the sheer force of their venom. The life Kate had painstakingly built was shattering before her eyes, crumbling into dust as she fled the sterile, unforgiving halls of the hospital. Tears cascaded down her cheeks, a torrent of despair that mirrored the devastation inside her. Kate burst out of the hospital, her mind a blur of pain and confusion, the world around her a hazy whirlwind. The receptionists exchanged startled glances as she rushed past them, oblivious to their concern. She found herself in a small, quiet cafe, the warmth of the space a stark contrast to the icy despair that clung to her soul. As she sat down, a strange sense of relief began to seep into her weary bones, the burden she had been carrying for what felt like an eternity finally easing its grip on her heart. Across from her sat Ian, a man whose disheveled appearance spoke of countless nights spent on the streets. Yet, in his eyes, Kate found something unexpected, a gentle kindness, an understanding that transcended his hardships. He had listened to her, truly listened, offering her a solace she hadn't realized she so desperately needed. In that moment of raw vulnerability, she felt a connection that went beyond words, a shared humanity that gave her a sliver of hope. "Sorry, I didn't mean to go on and on," Kate murmured, her voice trembling with embarrassment as she wiped at her tear-streaked face. Ian's response was soft, filled with an empathy that caught her off guard. "Don't apologize. We all need someone to listen sometimes. I hope letting it out has eased your pain, even just a little." A fragile smile touched Kate's lips, her heart swelling with gratitude. She felt a profound appreciation for this man who, despite his trials, had offered her comfort in her darkest hour. She decided to show her thanks in the only way she could by ordering him a sandwich and another cup of coffee, a small gesture to repay the kindness he had shown her. As they continued to talk, Kate learned about the life Ian had led and the twists of fate that had brought him to this point. Ian had once worked as a cleaner for a large company, a job that, while not glamorous, had given him a sense of purpose and stability. But when the company went under, Ian found himself adrift, with no severance pay and no savings to fall back on. The downward spiral was swift and unforgiving eviction, homelessness, a life of constant struggle to find odd jobs and survive on the charity of others. Yet, despite everything, Ian's smile remained bright, his spirit unbroken. "Kate," Ian said, his voice steady and warm, "if I had any say in that hospital, I'd hire you back without a second thought. You've got a good heart, and it's their loss, not yours." His words, simple yet powerful, touched something deep within her. For the first time in what felt like forever, Kate felt a flicker of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as lost as she had feared. Kate felt a gentle warmth bloom in her chest at Ian's kind words, a soothing balm for the deep wounds that had marred her spirit. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, so much so that she lost track of time, unaware that the sky outside had shifted from dusk to nightfall. It was only when she noticed the fading light that she realized how late it had become. Ian, ever perceptive, offered to walk her home, his concern for her safety evident in his voice. Yet, mindful of his disheveled appearance, he suggested walking a few steps behind her to avoid drawing unwanted attention. But Kate, deeply touched by his thoughtfulness and moved by the goodness she saw in him, simply shook her head with a tender smile. "I trust you, Ian. I don't care what others think. I'm proud to walk with you," she whispered, her words laced with sincerity. Ian's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, the depth of his gratitude almost palpable. Together they made their way through the dimly lit streets, their footsteps echoing in quiet companionship. When they arrived at the modest house Kate shared with her father, she paused at the door and offered to warm up some food, inviting Ian to join them for dinner. But true to his humble nature, Ian declined, gently insisting that it wasn't necessary. Despite Kate's repeated attempts to persuade him, he only smiled, his expression radiating warmth and appreciation. "Thank you for your kindness, Kate. It's more than enough." "Good night," he said, his voice filled with quiet strength, his eyes still glowing with that unmistakable brightness, even in the shadows. As Kate watched Ian walk away, a complex swirl of emotions stirred within her, profound gratitude for his unexpected companionship, mixed with an aching sadness for the turmoil still raging in her heart. She entered her home, feeling the weight of the day pressing heavily on her shoulders as she collapsed onto the living room sofa. Her mind, once again, became a storm of relentless thoughts. What should she do now? Should she report the surgeon to the authorities? Seek legal action? But how could she possibly prove the subtle, insidious nature of what had transpired? Her father, Mr. John Jones, emerged quietly from his room, his eyes immediately locking onto the pain etched across his daughter's face. Without a single word, he crossed the room and enveloped her in a strong embrace, his arms wrapping around her protectively, as if to shield her from all the world's cruelty. "Honey, you can always count on your father. I'll always be here for you," he murmured, his voice a steady anchor in the storm of her emotions, filled with unwavering love. Kate melted into her father's embrace, finally allowing herself to release the tears she had been holding back for so long. She wanted to pour out every detail of her torment, to unburden her soul to the one person who had always stood by her side, but the words lodged in her throat too heavy to speak. Instead, she let her tears do the talking, each drop a testament to the depth of her suffering. Eventually, the exhaustion of the day overtook her, and she drifted into a restless sleep against her father's shoulder, finding a fragile sense of peace in the safety of his arms. Mr. Jones waited patiently until he was certain that Kate had drifted into a deep, exhausted sleep. With a tenderness born of a lifetime of love, he carefully slipped out from under her, ensuring she was comfortably settled on the sofa. He draped a blanket over her and softly kissed her forehead, his heart heavy with an unspoken sorrow. Unbeknownst to Kate, this quiet, loving gesture would be the last time her father would comfort her, a final act of devotion in a life that had been defined by his unwavering support. The next morning, the shrill ring of Kate's phone alarm pierced the early silence, jolting her awake. She sprang out of bed, her heart racing as she hurried to silence it, fearful of disturbing her father. Today was the day she would start her search for a new job, and she dressed with care, attempting to shake off the lingering sorrow that clung to her like a shadow. As she entered the kitchen to begin preparing breakfast, a strange stillness hung in the air, a quiet so profound it made her uneasy. The only sound was the soft, plaintive meow of her cat, who sat unmoving in front of her father's closed bedroom door. The cat's behavior struck her as odd, but she dismissed the feeling, focusing instead on her morning routine. As she did every morning, Kate prepared her father's medications, the ritual so familiar that she barely gave it a second thought. With the pills in hand, she made her way to his room, opened the door, and was met with an eerie stillness. Her father lay in bed, appearing to be peacefully asleep. But as she drew closer, a cold dread began to creep over her. Something was terribly, inexplicably wrong. His skin was ashen, his body unnaturally still, and in that single heart-wrenching moment, the truth slammed into her with brutal force. The medication slipped from her trembling fingers, the pills scattering across the floor as the reality of her father's death sank in. Mr. John Jones was gone. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of grief and disbelief. At her father's funeral, Kate moved through the motions like a shadow of herself, the weight of her loss pressing down on her, suffocating her. She had devoted so much of her life to caring for him, never once imagining that he would be taken from her so suddenly, especially after he had comforted her just the night before. His reassuring words, "You can always count on me," echoed hauntingly in her mind, a painful reminder of what she had lost. Had he known his end was near? And why did he have to leave her now when she was already drowning in her struggles? The funeral was a small, intimate gathering, attended by those who had admired John Jones for his gentle spirit and steadfast optimism. But as the casket lid was closed, sealing her father away forever, Kate felt an unbearable pain, as if a vital part of her had been buried alongside him. After the burial, Kate found herself walking alone to the cemetery gate, the crushing weight of her grief bearing down on her. She was now without a job, without her father, and overwhelmed by grief so deep it threatened to consume her. As she reached for her phone to call a taxi, her attention was caught by a sleek, black luxury car parked across the street. A man stepped out and approached her with a solemn, respectful demeanor. He expressed his condolences and handed her a business card, explaining that his employer urgently wished to speak with her. Kate, too drained and numb to question his intentions, accepted the card with a distracted nod. The man, sensing her weariness, gently urged her to consider it, hinting that despite the immense pain she was enduring, this could be an opportunity she might not want to overlook. "See you soon," the man said, before returning to the car and driving away, leaving Kate standing in the cemetery, the card clutched tightly in her hand. The following week was a blur of darkness and despair for Kate. The apartment, once filled with the comforting presence of her father, now felt hollow and oppressive, haunted by memories she wasn't ready to face. The drive and ambition she had once felt to find a new job vanished, buried under the crushing weight of grief. Each day, she found herself unable to muster the energy to even leave her bed. The world outside moved on, but Kate felt as if she were suspended in time, trapped in a cycle of sorrow that seemed endless. Yet, in the rare moments when her grief subsided, her thoughts drifted back to the man who had handed her the card at the cemetery. Desperation gnawed at her, and with nothing left to lose, she decided to take a chance. She sent a brief message to the number on the card, not expecting much. To her surprise, just 2 hours later, the doorbell rang. Though still raw and far from her best, Kate was ready and waiting, curiosity mingling with nervous anticipation. She couldn't fathom what this mysterious meeting could be about, but perhaps it was the lifeline she so desperately needed. Outside, the same sleek luxury car from the cemetery was parked by the curb. The man from before stepped out, his demeanor calm but urgent. "Good morning, Miss Kate. My boss would like to meet you. Will you join me?" he asked, opening the car door with a respectful nod. Kate hesitated, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Who could this person be, and what could they possibly want with her? She was just an unemployed nurse, drowning in debt after her father's funeral expenses. But with nothing else to hold on to, she nodded and stepped into the car, her mind racing with questions as they drove away from the life she had known, toward a future she couldn't yet imagine. The car wound its way through the city, eventually stopping in front of a towering, modern building in one of the most prestigious areas of town. Kate had never been there before, and the sleek, glass-covered structure seemed almost intimidating. Inside, the lobby was a hive of activity, with people dressed in sharp business attire moving with purpose. After riding up 15 floors in a swift, silent elevator, Kate was introduced to the powerful woman who ran the company. She was impeccably dressed, exuding both authority and charisma. Her expression was serious, yet there was a warmth in her eyes that put Kate slightly at ease. Standing beside this woman was a man who immediately began speaking to Kate. "Kate, it's good to see you. First and foremost, my condolences," he said with genuine care, his voice soft and comforting. Then he smiled, a broad, familiar smile that made Kate's heart skip a beat. At first, Kate didn't recognize him, still trying to process the whirlwind of events that had brought her here. But as she looked closer, those bright eyes and that warm smile clicked into place. It was Ian Bradley, the homeless man she had met on the street. But he looked completely different now. His clothes were clean and stylish, his beard neatly trimmed, and his hair carefully groomed. It was as if the man she had once pitied had transformed into someone entirely new. Seeing her confusion, Ian quickly explained. He had been deeply worried about her after their last encounter. When she didn't return to the cafe, he had gone back several times, hoping to find her and make sure she was all right. During one of these visits, he had stumbled upon a group of business people at the cafe, all of whom seemed to know each other well. Among them was a woman who commanded attention, a woman who, as it turned out, ran one of the most successful companies in the city. The man with the hospital ID badge, Ian revealed, was a doctor who had been part of that group. The woman, intrigued by Ian's presence and his story, had taken him under her wing, helping him get back on his feet. With her assistance, Ian had been able to rebuild his life, and in return, he had asked for just one favor: to find Kate and offer her the help she might need. "Kate," Ian said softly, "you were kind to me when no one else was, and I've never forgotten that. I don't know what you're going through right now, but I want to help, just as you helped me. This woman, Mrs. Hargrove, is one of the most powerful people I know. She has the resources to offer you opportunities you might never have imagined. Please, just hear her out." Kate looked between Ian and Mrs. Hargrove, her heart pounding in her chest. The situation was surreal, almost unbelievable. But as she stood there, surrounded by people who seemed genuinely invested in her well-being, she began to feel a glimmer of hope, a tiny, fragile thing, but a hope nonetheless. Taking a deep breath, she nodded, ready to hear what Mrs. Hargrove had to offer, and perhaps, finally, begin to find a way out of the darkness that had consumed her life. Ian had been making his way toward the group, his eyes searching for Kate among the bustling crowd. But before he could get close, a security guard stepped in, blocking his path with an air of authority. Ian's heart sank as he tried to explain himself, but his words were lost in the confusion. The commotion caught the attention of a striking woman in the group, who observed the scene with a mix of curiosity and concern. As the men around her fell silent, Ian realized that this woman must be someone of significant influence. Determined to make his case, he approached her and explained his situation with a sense of urgency. "I'm looking for Kate," the nurse said, his voice trembling with a mix of hope and desperation. "She's been through something terrible with the chief surgeon at your hospital." The woman, who introduced herself as Megan Stewart, listened intently. Her eyes widened slightly in surprise as she absorbed the gravity of Ian's account. Megan, it turned out, was the owner of a chain of hospitals, a revelation that made Ian's heart skip a beat. Without hesitation, Megan took command of the situation, her authoritative voice cutting through the air. She instructed her team to halt all other activities and prioritize an immediate investigation into the allegations against the surgeon. True to her word, Megan's team sprang into action. They launched an internal probe, quickly uncovering a troubling pattern. Nurses, waitresses, and receptionists began to come forward, sharing their own unsettling experiences with the chief surgeon. The testimonies painted a disturbing picture of a man who used his position to make inappropriate jokes and engage in suggestive conversations. The flood of complaints was overwhelming, and it became clear that this was not an isolated incident. Determined to uncover the full extent of the surgeon's misconduct, Megan expanded the investigation to include other hospitals within her network, where the surgeon had previously worked. The results were shocking and disheartening. The investigation revealed a pattern of abusive behavior that had been hidden for years. Among the most alarming discoveries was an incident involving a waitress who had been drugged by the surgeon. Megan's team delved into archived security footage from the day in question. The footage clearly showed the surgeon, Rick Donovan, diluting a substance in a glass of water before offering it to the unsuspecting waitress. The video continued to reveal that, after the waitress took the drink, she entered an empty ICU room to change bed linens. Moments later, Rick Donovan followed her into the room. The footage then captured him exiting the ICU alone, visibly agitated and in a hurry, just 15 minutes later. The evidence was damning and confirmed the worst fears. Megan Stewart was resolute in her commitment to justice. She vowed to take swift action against Rick Donovan and ensure that such egregious behavior would not be tolerated in any of her hospitals. With a sense of determination, she promised Ian that Kate's ordeal would not be in vain and that she would fight tirelessly to hold the surgeon accountable and prevent further abuse. Ian left the meeting feeling a mix of relief and cautious optimism. Megan Stewart's intervention had given him hope that justice might finally be served for Kate and others who had suffered in silence. As he walked away from the bustling business building, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that the wheels of justice were now in motion and that his efforts to help Kate had made a tangible difference. The revelation of Rick Donovan's heinous actions ignited a fierce determination in Megan Stewart. The waitress, who had bravely come forward, recounted how the harassment had begun weeks earlier with an unwanted, lingering touch on her shoulder. The weight of this testimony, combined with the damning evidence, led to the swift opening of a case. In the courtroom, justice unfolded with a series of transformative events for Kate Jones. Kate's return to the hospital was not just a reinstatement but a significant promotion to the role of head nurse, a position that honored her resilience and dedication. Her unwavering commitment and bravery were finally recognized, rewarding her with the role she had long deserved. Meanwhile, Megan, moved by Ian's selflessness and crucial role in exposing the truth, offered him a job within the hospital. The financial compensation he received was generous enough to enable Ian to start a new chapter in his life, one marked by dignity and respect. Months passed, and the courtroom drama reached its climax. The judge handed down a sentence of 13 years in prison to Rick Donovan, a verdict that resonated deeply with Kate and the other victims. The sentence provided a sense of closure and justice, allowing them to find solace in the aftermath of their trials. Following the sentencing, Kate made a heartfelt visit to her father's grave, and she extended an invitation to Ian to join her. As she placed delicate flowers on the headstone, her voice carried a wistful tone. "I wish you had met my father," she said softly. "I would love to tell you all about him." Together, they strolled hand in hand toward the cemetery exit, their connection deepened by their shared journey. From time to time, they were seen together at the cafe where their paths first crossed, but now their companionship had blossomed into something more profound, a relationship forged through mutual support and understanding. As we wrap up this deeply moving story, we hope it has resonated with you and sparked reflections on the power of justice, kindness, and personal transformation. We've witnessed a journey of struggle, resilience, and ultimately, redemption, a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the importance of standing up for what's right. Now, we'd love to hear from you. What have you learned from this story? How has it impacted your perspective or inspired you to make a change in your own life? Please share one thing you've learned and how you plan to bring it into practice in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave your comment and be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiring content. Your support helps us continue to bring you stories that matter. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to connecting with you in our next video.